A royal guest, a vanished host, and a poisoned plate. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Drop your city below. I read every comment. Wolfe tastes deceit tonight. It was 5 minutes past 11, which meant my boss had traded orchids for chairs and gravity. He came down from the roof like a man surrendering to a secular law. If you think Nero Wolfe can be hurried by a clock, a tyrant, or a messenger with a trumpet, you haven't met him. The orchids get him from 9 to 11 and 4 to 6. The rest of the day gets him if it minds its manners. He had just rounded his desk and begun the business of putting bulk into leather when the doorbell gave a discreet single ring. The bell at the brownstone can sound like a church wedding or the sneeze of a mouse, depending on who presses it. This one coughed. I went. I opened to a woman with a hat that had spent more on quiet than most hats spend on feathers. Her coat had been tailored by someone who knew what a shoulder should do when nerves don't show. She was pretty in a way that made you think she had decided to be, which is rarer and more reliable than the other kind. She was also holding a paper-wrapped parcel about the size of a fat book. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked. Her voice was husky, like it had been filed for future evidence. "That's right," I said. "If you're selling encyclopedias, the big man doesn't do installment plans." "I'm not selling anything," she said. She glanced past me toward the office like people do when they have heard as many stories about it as we have heard about them. "I'm delivering an apology." "Those are 2 flights up," I said. "Third door on the left. We keep them with the unicorns." I stood aside. "Come in." She stepped into the hall and looked around like a cat who'd been assured there were no other cats. I took the parcel on a gentleman's reflex and led her down the 2 steps to the office. Wolfe had already settled, his eyes half-lidded, his lips ready for the work of saying no to things. Fritz, having heard the bell, would be hovering in the kitchen counting our silverware by consciousness alone. Sun watered through the window and collected on Wolfe's yellow shirt like it had stopped for lunch. "Miss," I said. "Varela," she said. "Lucia Varela." I gave Wolfe the parcel and the name. He gave her the minimum, a glance that weighed, a hand that didn't rise. "State your business," he said. It had the tone he reserves for lettuce that arrives wet. Miss Varela took one breath and stepped into her part. "I represent the Duke," she said. "Of what?" I asked. "Or whom?" Her mouth twitched. "The Duke. A man," she said. "His formal name is Austin Duke Easton, but in New York he's the Duke. He has a club, a dining society." "A restaurant?" Wolfe said without letting the word dirty the air. "Not exactly," she said. "It's private, invitation only. Events are curated." "Curated," Wolfe murmured. The syllables found no chair. She set her purse on the edge of my desk and did not open it. "Last night we held what we call a silent dinner. All communication by cards, no speech, no phones. The linens are monogrammed. The courses are introduced by light and scent. There is a pianist, uncredited. We have rules." "And you enforce them?" I asked. "Without exception," she said. "We have to, otherwise it becomes theater." Wolfe flicked his eyes at the parcel. "Open that," he told me. "If it's an apology, it will be edible. If it's edible, it will fail." I cracked the string and saw white paper inside white paper. I don't blush easy, but I felt like I should have washed my hands. The inner wrap had the kind of stock you see under wedding cake figurines. Inside that, on tissue, lay an oval of black slate with 2 objects on it. A bottle no higher than my thumb, stopped with wax the color of old cherries, and a folded square of linen embroidered with a crown you'd need a magnifying glass to salute. "Oil," Miss Varela said, nodding at the bottle. "And the napkin." Wolfe twitched a forefinger. I brought the slate. He broke the wax and let a drop of the oil hit the back of his hand. He sniffed, His nostrils did a small involuntary thing, the way they do when Fritz trims tarragon close. "No Clara," he said, cruelly young. He dabbed again, a priest not quite convinced of the miracle. "And the cloth." "It is the apology," she said. "Or rather, the lack of it is." "Mr. Wolfe," someone replaced the Duke's card with a blank at his own table. "During the third course." I looked at Wolfe. He looked at the napkin, which lay there pretending it had never caused trouble in its life. "We use cards at silent dinner," Miss Varela said. "Each place has a set, white-bordered with charcoal, the Duke's monogram in the corner. Guests write instead of speaking, requests, jokes, proposals, confessions, whatever they can carry with graphite. But one card matters more than the others. The host's final card. He writes it before the last course, and he places it face down atop his napkin. It is the only card that is read aloud, by me. Then I extinguish the candles and the piano starts again, and we— "That is sufficient," Wolfe said. He was not being unkind. He was limiting adjectives. She nodded. Last night the Duke's final card was blank. Blank, though he swears he wrote on it. Blank when I lifted it and turned to read. Blank while 34 very rich, very curious people waited for a benediction that was not there. "And?" I asked. "And the Duke turned to stone," she said. And then he smiled. He nodded to the pianist. The pianist, who had not been told anything because no one had been told anything, began what he thought would be the usual postscript. But the room had already begun to make its own sentences. The Duke did not flinch. He raised his glass as if silence were the toast he had planned all along. "And I," she said, "wanted to die." "You were humiliated," Wolfe said. "I was responsible," she said. "It is my floor, my cards, my candles, my rules." She looked at me and then at Wolfe. "I do not know how it happened. I do not know who took the Duke's card or how they put a blank in its place without anyone seeing. But it was done in my house. The Duke's guests left with their own stories. Some will never return." "And tonight," Wolfe asked. He didn't make it a question mark. He gave it a place to sit. "Tonight," she said, "there is an encore. By demand. The same guest list, -2 who discovered pressing engagements. The Duke insists. He says he will answer the blank. He says the interruption will be resolved." I had to admire the guy. When life hands you a blank, throw a sequel. "And why are you here?" Wolfe asked. "To apologize? To secure a waiver? To enlist our gratitude for a young Noxelara?" "I'm here," she said, "because the Duke is not angry. I am." That got Wolfe to lift his eyes a fraction higher. He doesn't distrust anger. He just disapproves when it isn't civilized. "Anger," he said. "At whom?" "At whomever thought to turn a rule into a weapon," she said. "At someone who wanted the Duke to swallow a silence in front of his own people. It was not a prank. It was a statement. And I won't have my floor used for propaganda." "You want Mr. Wolfe to find a vandal," I said, "and you've brought him salad dressing." "The oil is a courtesy," she said. "The napkin is an insult. I thought it would help to see it. The blank card is gone." "Gone?" Wolfe said, crisp. "You burned evidence to keep your aesthetic pure." "It disappeared," she said. Her jaw flattened. "After the dinner, we took inventory, I and my assistant. The place cards, the pencils, the seals, all accounted for. The Duke's card was not in the stack. It was not on the floor. It was not under a glass, not on a chair, not tucked into a pocket by accident. It was not anywhere. We searched. The waiters did not leave the room without inspection. We are not amateurs." "Yet the card vanished," Wolfe said. "And was replaced before it vanished," I said. "Someone got 2 tricks for the price of 1. Miss Varela's eyes moved between us like she was watching a match and waiting for the serve. "Tonight will be worse if it happens again," she said. "Or if the Duke tries to answer, and someone answers him instead. I can manage guests. I cannot police thought, but I can secure the room. I can check every pocket and mouth for a card. I can— No, Wolfe said. You cannot. If you tear the ritual, you have nothing to sell. You will have theater. You will have spectacle. Your patrons will go elsewhere to be seen. She swallowed. Yes, she said. So I ask you to help without tearing it. To observe, to advise, and if you can, to determine who thinks they are more important than my rules. Wolfe closed his eyes for 2 seconds. In our language, that is a paragraph. He opened them and aimed at me. Archie. Present, I said. You will take Miss Varela to her club, he said. You will look at her room, her table, her pianoforte, her cards and their journey from box to hand. You will speak to the waiters and the assistant and the pianist and any other mammal who touches vellum. You will examine last night's seating and tonight's list. You will ask the Duke Easton if his handwriting requires an amanuensis. You will return by 3. 3, I said. I checked my wrists for room. And my lunch? Fritz will send you into the world fortified. I will not be reading about you in the papers. Miss Varela inhaled like a diver who hears the splash, but not the lifeguard. You'll take the case? Wolfe didn't answer her. He addressed the air. Miss Varela, you will provide Mr. Goodwin access to all instruments of the right and all personnel. You will permit him to stand where the Duke sits. You will not inform anyone that he is an investigator. He is your cousin. He is from Toledo, where he sells typewriters. He is in town to see the lights. I can say that, she said. Why take it? I mean, thank you, but why? Because you brought me a napkin, Wolfe said, and it managed to insult me. That too, I said, and because he wants to know why a man who names himself a duke would host a dinner where no one talks. It offends his sense of economy. It offends my sense of nature, Wolfe corrected. And if your duke intends to answer a blank with a performance, I wish to be inoculated. She nodded once, as if something she had been bracing for had arrived and didn't break her. We open at 7. Guests enter at 8. The Duke sits at 9. The cards are passed at 9:10. The final card is at 10:30. Who is seated at the Duke's table? I asked. Besides the Duke, she said. Mrs. Daphne Cargill, patron, loud without speaking. Mr. Emmanuel Rusk, the pianist's impresario who never eats. Dr. Simon Pelham, he likes rules. Ms. Isul Park, our designer. And Mr. Vance Olmsted, the writer who is never not writing. Writer, Wolfe said, distaste like a dash of vinegar. He will have kept his own card then, and perhaps stolen everyone else's. He draws, not writes, she said. Little ink figures. He leaves them under glasses for strangers to find later and call discovery art. We collect them and say thank you. Your assistant? I asked. Lotta Charlotte Keene, she said. Smart, scared. She won't be when she's older. The waiters, Piotr, Stefan, and Miles. All practiced, all bribed plenty by me not to make eye contact with celebrities. And the Duke? Wolfe said. Describe him to me as if you were trying to avoid describing him. She thought. That was something I liked about her. She didn't rush her lies because she might need them later. He is a man who hates to be overheard, she said. He calls it privacy. Other people call it control. He's not vain exactly, but he knows how he photographs. He can hold a room by refusing to hold it. He's generous with everything that doesn't cost him. An American, Wolfe said. Yes, she said. Old money that learned to dress like new. Wolfe leaned back. The chair believed in him. It didn't even creak. Very well, he said. Mr. Goodwin will go with you. I will consider where to place a small wedge under your ritual, so that it bears weight without splitting. In the meanwhile, leave that, he gestured to the slate, as proof that you were here and that I did not leap to my feet and embrace you. She let a corner of her mouth tick upward. If you had, she said, I would have fainted, and then you would have had stillness and theater. I got her coat for her because I'm not an animal, and because when a woman brings you a napkin that has offended your employer, you usher her personally. In the hall, she paused. "Mr. Goodwin," she said low. "There is one more thing. The Duke's final card last night. If it had not been blank, it would have announced something. He has been considering a change, a partnership. Some of our patrons would not like it. Others would like it too much." "What kind of partnership?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. He doesn't tell me until after he makes it impossible to object. But he told me before the dinner that I might want to be ready to explain. So when the card was blank, it wasn't only an embarrassment, it was a theft of his timing." "Ah," I said. "Theft. We're back in my jurisdiction." Down the steps, the door opened to November and a sky that couldn't make up its mind. I got her into a cab and told her I'd see her and her silent circus after lunch. When I turned back, Fritz had materialized in the doorway with a plate that could have fed a small, grateful army. Eggs, 2 ways. The man knows I do reconnaissance best with protein. In the office, Wolfe had the napkin pinched between forefinger and thumb like a botanist who has found a leaf that doesn't belong. He looked at me. "You disapprove," I said. "Of her, of it, or of me committing my afternoon to cards?" "I disapprove," he said, "of the assumption that silence improves sense. It rarely does. But this is not about sense. It is about signal." "Meaning what?" He let the napkin fall back to the slate. "Meaning," he said, "that whoever did this was testing not the rules of a club, but the reach of a man. They wanted to know what happens when he is made to say nothing. And what does happen? We will discover," he said, "what the Duke loses when he is not the one withholding. Go. Learn the room. Watch the hands. Find the pencil that was used and the hand that did not smudge." I picked up my hat. "And if the card vanished because the Duke wanted to pretend to have written and couldn't bring himself to?" Wolfe closed his eyes again, just briefly, like he was memorizing the shape of a thought. "Then," he said, "he will be punished for confusing appetite with authority, and I will never forgive the oil." Which, for a man who can forgive a good deal in the vicinity of butter, was a strong statement. I left him to his chair, his napkin, and the quiet that in that house does not mean surrender. It means the game has started and the rules have not yet been posted. By the time we crossed the river, the November light had taken on that clean, colorless quality that makes everything look like a photograph someone forgot to develop. Miss Varela rode in silence, which suited her theme. I tried twice to bait conversation, once with a question about the club's decor, once with a wisecrack about how a silent dinner must be murder on the waitstaff. But she just gave small, closed-lipped smiles that told me her mind was at work somewhere deeper. When a woman keeps her own silence in a case that started with stolen silence, you start to respect the symmetry. The Duke's establishment occupied a stretch of refurbished warehouse on the lower edge of Soho, where money pretends to be art until art sells it a lease. No sign, no doorman, just an arched brass door with a knocker shaped like a spoon. Inside, everything breathed money without making a sound about it. The walls were a kind of subdued cream, the kind that made you feel guilty for having fingerprints. The scent was faintly citrus, faintly something else I couldn't place. Something old, maybe oak or memory. Miss Varela led me through a hall and into the dining chamber. The room was a geometric poem, long mahogany tables centered under a ring of soft lamps, chairs like disciplined soldiers, and a piano in the far corner beside an abstract painting that had probably cost someone a summer home. The place had the hush of a church that preferred its gods anonymous. She moved with the assurance of someone who had built the temple. "The Duke's seat," she said, touching the high-backed chair at the head. "The incident occurred here." The card was placed precisely on this plate. I leaned down. The charger was silver, engraved with a crest, 2 crossed forks beneath a crown. You took inventory after the dinner. Who had access between the end of the meal and the inspection? Only staff, she said. My assistant, Lotta Keene, the waiters, and myself. The pianist remained at the instrument. No one approached this table without my knowledge. Except the culprit, I said. That, she replied evenly, is what I require you to prove. The assistant, Charlotte Lotta, arrived then, a young blonde with eyes that carried permanent apology. She wore black, of course, like the rest, but her version looked slightly wilted, as though the uniform had outlasted her sleep. She confirmed that the cards were standard issue. Linen stock, thick as coasters, pre-stamped with the Duke's crest in graphite grey. We count them before and after each event, she said. Last night's count matched, except for, well, that one. The Duke's, I said. How do you store the cards? In a locked drawer in the office upstairs, she said, until 30 minutes before service. Then I placed them at each setting myself. Any replacements? Damaged cards? Extras? No extras, she said. I keep 2 spares for accidents, but neither was used. Miss Varella's posture stiffened a little. She didn't like being reminded of gaps in procedure. I let her have her dignity. Who locked the drawer after you set the tables? I asked. I did, Lotta said, and Miss Varella keeps the key. So the key didn't travel, but maybe the hands did. I walked the perimeter of the room, noting angles. The pianist's corner offered a clear view of the Duke's chair. So did a mirror placed deliberately to reflect the table from behind the service console. Someone observant or cunning could have swapped a card with the right timing and a pre-written blank. Tell me about the Duke, I said. Would he leave the table unattended? Miss Varella smiled faintly. He would sooner stop breathing. Then whoever did this worked under his nose, or he's in on it. Her silence didn't deny it. She just said, "You'll see him soon." We climbed to the second floor, past a corridor hung with black and white portraits of previous dinners. Each photo showed guests mid-course, eyes focused, mouths closed. It was eerie. 30 people at a feast looking like they were listening for ghosts. In the office, a desk gleamed with obsessive neatness. The drawer that held the cards was indeed locked. Lotta produced the spares. Identical to the ones on the table, edges sharp, scent faintly of starch and graphite. I pocketed one for Wolfe's analysis. He likes evidence he can insult personally. At a knock, Miss Varella turned. A man entered with the sort of confidence that gets measured in decibels of quiet. The Duke Easton, at a glance, was mid-40s, dark hair silvering near the temples, tailored like a confession. His eyes were grey, the kind that watch themselves watching you. He smiled as if manners were a calculated risk. "Miss Varella," he said, voice low and clean, "and you must be Mr. Goodwin, the cousin from Toledo." I gave him the grin I keep for professional fiction. "That's me, here to admire your acoustics." "I hope they'll impress you," he said. "Tonight's performance should be restorative." He studied me a second longer, then drifted toward the desk. "Lucia tells me you have an interest in misplaced gestures." "I've been known to find a few," I said. "She also tells me last night's dinner ended with a missing card." The Duke's smile thinned but didn't crack. "Silence can be eloquent, Mr. Goodwin. Sometimes it says exactly what one wishes not to hear." "That's poetic," I said, "but it's also convenient." He inclined his head. "Truth often is. I assure you, I wrote my card. If someone replaced it, they did so with purpose and precision. But we are not children. We won't sulk over a trick." "Yet you're repeating the performance," I said. "To reclaim the narrative," he replied. "An artist must answer interruption with form, not fury." I nodded slowly. "And tonight, everyone's invited back, including whoever pulled your strings." "Especially them," he said. "I'd like to see what they do when the curtain doesn't fall." There was something about the way he said it, mild but edged, that made me want to check the exits before dessert. He offered a hand, cool and steady. "Enjoy your tour, Mr. Goodwin. I trust you'll stay for the dinner." "I wouldn't miss it," I said. He left as silently as he'd entered. Miss Varela let out a breath she'd been saving. "You see," she said quietly, "he's composed. Too composed." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe he's already written his next card." When I left her, the afternoon had begun to tilt into that grey pre-evening that makes the city look like it's waiting for instructions. I found a phone booth on the corner and called the brownstone. Fritz answered and transferred me. Wolfe's voice came on, impatient with the world. "Well, the stage is set," I said. "One vanished card, one immaculate hostess, one duke who likes silence because it talks about him. I've got names, layout, and one souvenir card for your sniffing." "And the girl?" Wolfe asked. "She's neat, nervous, and believes in rules the way you believe in butter." "That may yet save her," he said. "Return before 7. I wish to see that card, and bring your discernment. It seems we dine among mimes." "Gladly," I said. "If the food's as good as the mystery, I'll take a vow of silence myself." "Phew," he muttered, and hung up, which, in our line of work, was as close to affection as a man like Wolfe ever gets. By the time I made it back to the brownstone, the day had lost its edges. The city lights were starting their usual argument with the fog, and I was thinking that Nero Wolfe's idea of silence might be the only honest one left in town. Inside, the air smelled of beer bread and oregano, a domestic reminder that crime, unlike Wolfe's dinner, never waits for an invitation. He was in his chair, of course, a mountain of patience behind the desk, with a glass of beer in front of him and that little half-lidded stare that says the world is already explaining itself if you'd only shut up long enough to listen. I handed him the spare card, wrapped in a sheet of paper. He took it like it was a snake that had promised to behave. "You touched this?" he asked. "Only enough to keep it from flying away," I said. He studied it under the lamp, turning it once, twice, and then bringing it close to his nose. "Graphite-lined border," he murmured. "Handmade linen stock. Italian, likely Florentine. The monogram, machine-stamped, not embossed. The Duke pays for the illusion of handcraft." "I've met people like that," I said. "Usually they're selling sincerity by the ounce." He grunted, which for Wolfe is halfway to applause. "Tell me everything, Archie. Spare me your impressions of upholstery." So I gave it to him, straight through. The table setup, the staff, Miss Varela's nervous precision, Lotta's wilted nerves, the Duke's poise that smelled too much like rehearsal. I even threw in the layout of the room, the mirrors, and how the piano's placement gave a perfect line of sight to the host's seat. When I finished, Wolfe rolled the card between his fingers like he was weighing it against the laws of physics. "A performance," he said at last. "A dinner of ritualized muteness, ending with an enforced void. The Duke is a man who needs to control the noise around him. To have his voice erased, symbolically, would be a wound to the self." "So the culprit either wanted to humiliate him," I said, "or prove they could touch him without leaving fingerprints." "Or both," Wolfe said. "But this is not humiliation for its own sake. It was done publicly, but without destruction, an exhibition of power within the rules of civility. That is artifice, which means the motive is not rage, but ideology." "Someone's making a point," I said. "You think this was personal, or one of those fashionable revolts against privilege?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that you will discover soon enough. Did the Duke strike you as a man capable of staging his own victimhood?" "He could sell the ticket and act the part," I said. "But why stage it?" "To own the aftermath," Wolfe said. "But we shall not speculate. We will prepare. You will return tonight as her cousin from Toledo. You will eat, observe, and keep your pencil sharp. No more than 3 questions per suspect. Any more, and you will betray curiosity." "Curiosity is my day job," I said. "Then tonight it is unpaid," Wolfe replied. "And remember, the Duke's answer will come not from his voice, but his control. Watch for the moment when someone stops obeying." Fritz appeared in the doorway with my dinner. Veal cutlet, spinach, a roll that looked like it had been disciplined into perfection. Wolfe watched me eat as though the way I handled a fork might solve the case. At 7:15, I was back in a cab heading to the Duke's club. The streets looked cleaner than they had a right to, slick from a short drizzle, lights rippling in the asphalt. The building loomed ahead, same spoon-shaped knocker, same silence waiting behind it. Inside, Miss Varela met me at the door. She was composed, but the calm had a hairline crack running through it. "We've checked everything twice," she said. "Cards, pencils, seating, nothing irregular." "Except the people," I said. She gave a faint smile. "You're learning." Guests were arriving, a study in quiet vanity. Mrs. Daphne Cargill came first, wrapped in fur and self-regard. Rusk, the pianist's impresario, followed, his thin face glowing with the satisfaction of someone who feeds off other people's genius. Then Dr. Pelham, a small man with the precision of a ruler, and Isolde Park, who looked like she'd stepped out of her own design sketch. Last came Vance Olmsted, the writer. Tall, ink-stained fingers, eyes that registered everything as material. I took a seat near the far end of the table, pretending to be a family man on holiday from Ohio, which fooled no one but kept everyone polite. The Duke entered at 9 on the dot, carrying silence the way other men carry medals. He greeted no one, simply sat, hands folded. The cards lay stacked neatly beside each plate, pencils sharpened. Miss Varela dimmed the lights. The pianist began to play something soft, circular, the kind of melody that doesn't end so much as keep breathing. For the first hour, nothing happened that wasn't planned. Dishes came and went, each one a masterpiece, each one served wordlessly. The guests wrote on their cards, passing them like confessions. A waiter collected and replaced them with practiced grace. I watched fingers, eyes, little gestures, Pelham's twitch, Park's smirk, Cargill's impatient tapping. Rusk wrote nothing at all. Then, during the third course, something shifted. The Duke picked up his pencil, wrote deliberately, and placed his final card atop the folded napkin. For a moment, I caught Miss Varela's eyes, alert, ready. A minute later, one of the waiters, Piotr, I recognized, approached the Duke's chair. His tray tipped slightly, and I saw it. A movement, quick and exact, like sleight of hand. The napkin shifted. The Duke's expression didn't change, but Miss Varela stiffened. Then came the ritual's close. She lifted the Duke's card, unfolded it, and stopped. The color drained from her face. Blank. Again. A silence fell heavier than the first. 30 guests stared. The Duke didn't move. His lips curled, almost a smile. Then he rose, lifted his glass, and said the only words of the night. "Gentlemen and ladies," an echo. The pianist struck a final chord. Miss Varela swayed as though someone had struck her, and I realized, this time, the blank card wasn't a repetition. It was a challenge. Someone was answering the Duke's silence with their own. The silence after the Duke's toast hung so heavy it felt like the chandeliers were listening. No one moved, not even to blink. Miss Varela's hand still clutched the card, fingers trembling like the words she wanted to speak had forgotten how to exist. Then the Duke smiled, thin, deliberate, and that broke the spell. Guests began to murmur in hushed tones, a rustle of confusion carefully wrapped in etiquette. The pianist struck a few uncertain notes before catching the Duke's nod and letting them die. The Duke set his glass down. "My friends," he said softly, "it appears we are haunted by repetition." Laughter, polite and fragile, skimmed the air. He continued, Let us take this echo as a compliment. Someone wishes to perfect our silence. Miss Varela, see to the guests' comfort. Mr. Rusk, play something optimistic. And just like that, the storm folded itself into ceremony again. People rose, some pretending amusement, others hiding irritation behind half-empty glasses. I watched Miss Varela. She was pale, running on discipline. She caught my eye briefly, but didn't move toward me. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't sound like panic. I didn't wait for permission. I slipped from my chair and circled the edge of the room toward Pyotr, the waiter I'd seen shift the napkin. He was near the service alcove, stacking trays, his movements too precise to be innocent. "Nice touch with the balancing act," I said, low enough not to carry. He froze, eyes flicking up. "Excuse me." His accent was faint, Eastern European with a practiced polish. "The tray," I said. Bit of a wobble earlier. Nearly cost the Duke his napkin. His jaw tightened. "Nothing fell." "Right," I said. But something disappeared. He straightened, set the tray down carefully, and leaned close enough for me to smell starch and nerves. "You should not be here." "Maybe not," I said. "But I am. So let's make it productive. Where's the card?" "I don't know what you mean." His eyes darted toward the main room. "You are guest. Please, return." That was when another waiter, Stefan, taller, bulkier, appeared at the kitchen door. "Pyotr," he said sharply, in a tone that wasn't friendly. "Chef needs help." Pyotr shot him a look that said a great deal more than his words had, then walked off quickly. I made a mental note. 2 waiters too alert to be innocent and too calm to be clumsy. Back at the table, Miss Varela was managing the aftermath, her voice steady but thin. "We'll have coffee and cordials in the lounge," she announced. "Please, everyone. No need to linger here." The Duke had drifted toward the piano, speaking quietly to Rusk. The others filed out, though a few, Olmsted especially, watched with the curiosity of someone taking notes for later publication. I slipped to Miss Varela's side. "You've got a repeat offender," I said. "Same trick, same moment. Only difference is this time your Duke expected it." Her eyes flicked to me. "You saw something?" "Enough to make me skip dessert. The waiter, Pyotr, quick with his hands, and that other one, Stefan, runs interference." She pressed a hand to her temple. "No, they're careful. They've worked every dinner for 2 years. They wouldn't risk their paychecks? Maybe not. But someone's paying them more for something else." Before she could answer, the Duke appeared beside us, the way a man might materialize when he's finished letting the room talk about him. "Miss Varela," he said mildly, "our Mr. Goodwin seems troubled. Perhaps you'll both join me in the study." We followed him down a narrow hallway lined with framed menus and calligraphy samples, artifacts of past performances. The study was smaller, dimly lit, with shelves of culinary philosophy and a decanter that looked like it came from an age when people named their furniture. The Duke closed the door, turned to me, and said, "You are watching closely. I appreciate that." "I'm flattered," I said. "Most hosts don't like guests who notice their silverware disappearing." He gave a slow smile. "The trick has lost its surprise for me, but not its value. Someone wanted to see what I would do the second time." "And what will you do?" I asked. "Observe," he said. "The dinner was never about speech. It's about power. To speak, to withhold, to command silence. The thief understands that language. So do I." "That's poetic," I said. "But if someone's trying to make a point, they might not stop at stealing stationery." "Perhaps," he said. "But we are not at war, Mr. Goodwin. We are negotiating symbolism. Whoever replaces my words with emptiness believes they can unmake me with their quiet. I intend to let them try." He turned to Miss Varela. "Lucia, have the staff remain. No one leaves until we're done speaking with them." Her eyes widened. You want to question them here? Here, he said. In the ritual's shadow, let us see who breaks first. He dismissed her with a glance and poured himself a small measure of brandy. You may remain, Mr. Goodwin. You seem to have a taste for discomfort. I stayed. Wolfe would have wrung my neck for doing so without orders, but the moment had teeth. One by one the staff entered, the 3 waiters and Lotta, pale as milk. The Duke asked nothing theatrical. He merely said, "One of you knows where my words went." Piotr looked at the floor. Stefan's arms folded like a barricade. Miles, the youngest, looked terrified. Lotta trembled so visibly it was almost deliberate. "No punishments," the Duke said quietly. "No accusations. I simply want my card returned." Silence. Then, something soft, a sound like paper brushing fabric. I turned. Miles had slipped a hand into his apron and pulled out a folded napkin. His face had gone grey. "Sir," he said, voice breaking, "I found it, after the first dinner, on the floor near your chair. I meant to return it, but—" "But?" the Duke asked. "I showed it," Miles whispered, "to Mr. Olmsted. He said it might be valuable." Miss Varela gasped. The Duke's expression didn't move, but his stillness deepened. "Valuable," he repeated. "How charming." I took the napkin from the boy, unfolded it. There was writing, faint, deliberate, in charcoal pencil. 5 words. It said, "You are not the author." The Duke's eyes met mine, calm as a locked door. "Well," he said softly, "it seems the silence has learned to speak." The Duke's tone was steady, but I could feel the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. He took the napkin from me like a judge accepting evidence he'd already ruled on, eyes fixed on those 5 words as though they were written in fire. Miss Varela stood motionless beside the door, her hand gripping the frame for a balance. Miles, the waiter, looked ready to vanish into the wallpaper. The Duke unfolded the napkin again, staring at it longer than was polite. Then, very softly, he said, "Lucia, send the others out." She hesitated, glancing at me, then nodded. The staff shuffled out, silent as ghosts. The Duke waited until the door closed before lowering himself into the chair behind the desk. He set the napkin flat and smoothed it with his palm. "You're not the author," he repeated, voice low and clear. 4 words, Archie. 4 words that tell me more than an entire confession. I said nothing. When a man like that starts thinking out loud, interrupting is like tapping the brakes on a downhill truck. He looked up at me. "Do you understand the insult?" "I can take a guess," I said. "Someone's telling you you're not in charge of your own story, which, for a man whose name is the dinner, might sting." He smiled faintly. "Sting? No. Infuriate, yes. But only because it's true." That earned him a raised eyebrow from me. "That's refreshingly honest, considering the setup you've built." "Honesty is a luxury," he said. "Control, however, is survival. I've curated everything in that room. The menu, the lighting, the sequence of silences. To have someone whisper, even in graphite, that I am not the author? That's not vandalism, it's authorship theft. Which suggests the culprit knows your philosophy," I said. "Someone close enough to understand what silence means to you." Miss Varela stepped forward, voice tight. "You think one of us wrote it?" The Duke turned his gaze on her, and for a moment I saw something like regret cross his face. "Lucia, the person who wrote that, knows me intimately. They knew how to strike, where to strike, and when." I didn't miss her flinch. "You're saying someone inside your circle?" He nodded once. "And not for money. For authorship. Someone who wants the narrative to shift." I leaned back. Then Olmsted fits the bill. A writer who doesn't like being edited, saw a card with a grand reveal on it, and decided to rewrite it. "Perhaps," the Duke said, "but we cannot assume." You've seen what happens when assumptions replace evidence. I looked at Miss Varela. You mentioned he was considering a partnership. Maybe this is someone's protest letter, unsigned but loud. Her lips parted, but before she could speak, there was a knock. Lotta slipped back in, pale as parchment. I'm sorry, she said. Mr. Olmsted is asking to leave. He says he has a deadline. The Duke's eyes glinted. How poetic. He rose smoothly. Let him wait 1 minute. Mr. Goodwin, you'll accompany me. We found Olmsted in the lounge, coat on, eyes flicking between the door and the clock like both might explode if he stayed. He greeted us with that detached politeness artists use when they're rehearsing detachment. Leaving early? I asked. I've seen enough theatre for 1 night, he said. Twice is repetition, 3 times is parody. The Duke didn't answer. He simply handed Olmsted the napkin. Your critique, perhaps? Olmsted looked down at it, and for a fraction of a second, just long enough for my detective instincts to perk up, his pupils dilated. He recovered fast. Intriguing, he said, dry as salt. Though I'd have chosen a different medium. You didn't, the Duke said softly. Olmsted chuckled. You think I wrote that? My dear Duke, I don't do anonymous work. If I wanted to say that to you, I'd print it and sign the dust jacket. That's exactly what concerns me, the Duke said. You'd never resist the authorship of an insult, which makes your denial convincing and suspiciously convenient. Olmsted's expression sharpened. If this is an interrogation, I'll have to start charging consultation rates. Not yet, I said. But if you're clean, you won't mind staying until Mr. Wolfe hears from us. He blinked. Wolfe? As in Nero Wolfe. You brought him into this? Indirectly, I said. He's allergic to dinner parties. Olmsted laughed once. Too quick, too sharp. Then I envy him. He set the napkin on the table and turned to Miss Varela, who'd followed quietly. For your sake, Lucia, I hope your Duke understands how to end a story before it eats itself. Then he walked out before anyone could stop him. The Duke didn't follow. He stood perfectly still, eyes still on the door. He's clever, he said finally. Too clever to write that line. And yet he wanted us to think he didn't, I finished. He looked at me, something like approval flickering in his expression. Precisely. Which makes him either innocent or an artist of very rare cruelty. Miss Varela rubbed her temple. So, what do we do? I said, I call Wolfe. He doesn't move for anyone, but he thinks better when the world misbehaves. Back at the brownstone an hour later, I laid the napkin on Wolfe's desk. He stared at it as if it were a confession written by a philosopher he disliked. You are not the author, he read slowly. Archie, the syntax is deliberate. Present tense. Addressed to a man accustomed to omniscience. Fits the Duke, I said. Fits anyone who believes they create worlds, Wolfe said. The writer, the hostess, even the designer. Did you observe their reactions? I told him. He nodded slightly, eyes drifting shut. The one who wrote it wanted to provoke a demonstration, not concealment. Tonight's repetition was the second act. Then there's going to be a third? I asked. He opened his eyes, and they had that gleam that means the logic gears were starting to hum. Unless we intervene? Yes. Whoever authored this intends to make the Duke's authorship collapse in public. The theft of a card was a message. The next theft will be something he cannot replace. And what's that? I asked. Control, he said. Or perhaps the illusion of it. He leaned back, closing his eyes again, already sinking into the puzzle. Tomorrow, he murmured. You'll return. Tell Miss Varela I require every card from both dinners, and find out what, precisely, the Duke planned to announce before his voice was stolen. Why? Because, Wolfe said, No one steals a man's words unless they fear what he was about to say. Morning in the brownstone is usually a quiet affair. Fritz humming in the kitchen, the paper rustling under my coffee cup, and Wolfe somewhere above, speaking Latin to orchids that don't care. But that morning, there was no peace. Wolfe had sent word from the plant rooms that he'd be down early. For him, that meant 10. When he came, he brought the look of a man who had decided the universe was tolerable only if it explained itself. He lowered himself into the chair and steepled his fingers. "The napkin," he said. I slid it across the desk. Still 4 words. Still smug. He studied it. "This is not vandalism, Archie. It's declaration. Whoever wrote it wished to usurp creation, not destroy it. That distinction is the root of all insolence." "Meaning?" "Meaning?" he said. "The culprit fancies themselves the truer architect of the Duke's spectacle. We are not chasing resentment, but authorship. Call Miss Varela." She answered my call quickly, her voice clipped but steady. "I've been expecting you," she said. "The Duke hasn't slept. He's been locked in his study since dawn. Lotta's terrified. Olmsted hasn't returned calls, and the Duke's assistant, he's gone missing." "Assistant," I said. "He's got one of those?" "Edwin Tripp handles correspondence and guest curation. He was supposed to arrive at 8. He hasn't." "Any reason he'd bolt?" "Unless fear counts," she said. "No." That was enough to make me get my coat. Wolfe told me as I reached the door, "Bring me what's missing, and if you find the man, bring his handwriting." The Duke's club looked different in daylight, less mystique, more dust. The glamour had slept badly. Miss Varela met me in the entry, dark circles under her eyes, composure hanging by threads. "He's inside," she said. "He won't see anyone else." The Duke looked worse than his reputation could afford. Same tailored suit, but rumpled like he'd wrestled a philosophy. He was pacing, which for a man like him was as shocking as Wolfe jogging. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, gesturing to a chair, "we have a problem." "Sing it," I said. He stopped by the desk and pointed to a small wooden box. That contained my correspondence archive, every invitation, every guest card, every private message exchanged between me and patrons. It's gone. Vanished between midnight and 7. Inside job? Unquestionably. The locks are untouched. Only Miss Varela and I have keys. "Your assistant?" I asked. He nodded slowly. Tripp had access, and an unfortunate fascination with observation. He documented everything, notes on guests, drafts of my speeches, even sketches of table settings. If someone wished to dismantle me, they would begin with him. Or he began it himself, I said. His lips curved, humorless. He admired me, too much to betray me, but admiration is a fickle servant. I turned to Miss Varela. "How long's he been with you?" 6 months, brilliant, quiet, obsessive. The Duke found him at a symposium on culinary philosophy. "Which is what, exactly?" I said. "Pretentious," she admitted. "But he could catalogue an entire event by scent and timing alone." "That's useful for someone writing a manifesto," I said. She stiffened. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," I said, "except that the kid might have been taking notes for the wrong book." The Duke sank into his chair, exhaustion replacing his polish. "Mr. Goodwin, this card theft, this message, it's more than mischief. It's orchestration. Someone intends to unravel me through irony, to show that silence was never mine to command." "Then they've started well," I said. Before he could answer, Lotta appeared at the door, pale as skim milk. "Mr. Tripp's apartment," she said breathlessly. We called. No answer. "But his neighbor?" She said she saw someone there early this morning, carrying boxes. "Boxes?" "Boxes," she repeated. "Paper, folders, a stack of them." The Duke straightened. "Where?" "West 46th, near 9th, she said. I looked at the Duke. If you can keep your silence for a few hours, I'll see what your chronicler's up to." He gave a faint, sardonic smile. "Find him, and if he's rewritten my story, retrieve the draft." I left Miss Varela watching him like she expected him to disappear next. The cab took me to Tripp's building. Walk up, quiet, street, the kind of place where secrets wait their turn. The door to his flat was locked, but a helpful landlady who believed in politeness as much as gossip let me in. Inside, the air was stale and smelled faintly of graphite and cloves. There were stacks of paper everywhere. Notes, sketches, menus, diagrams of the Duke's dinners. On one wall, a corkboard was covered with index cards. Every card had a word written in black pencil: taste, power, silence, control, author. In the center, pinned with a red thumbtack, was a napkin identical to the others. On it, written in the same faint charcoal as before: "He will erase himself." I was halfway to the phone when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there was Tripp, pale, hollow-eyed, hair uncombed, clutching a notebook like it was oxygen. "Mr. Goodwin," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "Neither should your souvenirs," I said. "You've been collecting history without permission." He looked past me toward the corkboard, his expression somewhere between guilt and pride. Someone had to preserve it before he destroyed it. "Destroyed what?" "The truth," he said. "The Duke doesn't curate silence. He consumes it. Everyone who enters his dinners leaves quieter, smaller. He writes their restraint and calls it art." "That's philosophy," I said. "Not felony." He shook his head. "You don't understand. He planned to reveal something last night, something that would turn his dinners into a franchise. Silence for sale. I couldn't let that happen. It's not art anymore if it's owned." "So you took his card," I said. He blinked. "I replaced it. I wrote the truth." "You are not the author," I repeated. His mouth twitched into a faint smile. "Exactly. Neither is he. No one is. Silence belongs to itself." I felt the cold bloom at the back of my neck. "And tonight? What happens next?" He looked toward the board, eyes unfocused. "He'll try to answer again, and I'll stop him again. Only this time, he won't have words left." I reached for the phone, but he was already backing away. "Tell Mr. Wolfe," he said. "He'll understand. This isn't crime, it's correction." Then he was gone, down the hall before I could move, leaving only the echo of his voice and a room full of stolen sentences. By the time I called Wolfe, he didn't sound surprised. "Ah," he said, "the disciple revolts against the scripture. Classic. Return at once, Archie. The Duke must not attempt a third dinner. If he does, our philosopher will transform silence into tragedy." And for once, I didn't argue. "Now generate the final section of the story, ensuring a satisfying resolution. Maintain the logical progression of clues and character arcs, delivering the final reveal smoothly while keeping the ending impactful and true to the detective style."